Okay, Year 12, this video covers the reading and annotations for chapter 38. It's quite a long chapter, so I'm probably going to break this into two videos. As you'll remember from chapter 37, Offred is at Jezebel's with the commander, and she's just seen and made eye contact with Moira, and they are meeting in the ladies' washroom to catch up with each other. So this starts with Offred as she walks to the washroom. I find the entrance to the women's washroom. It still says ladies in scrolly gold script. There's a corridor leading into the door and a woman seated on a table beside it, supervising the entrances and exits. She's an older woman wearing a purple caftan and gold eyeshadow, but I can tell she is nevertheless an aunt. The cattle prod's on the table, its thong around her wrist. No nonsense here. So there's a woman who is an aunt guarding who is allowed in and out of the ladies or the women's washroom, and we've got some kind of absurdity here that this aunt, who is meant to be one of the characters who is whose role is the religious indoctrination of the handmaids at the Red Centre, the kind of the supervision and oversight and control of the women in Gilead, particularly the handmaids, is dressed in this purple caftan with gold eyeshadow. And so we have another inversion of this kind of costuming, this iconography in Gilead, and it becomes absurd and hypocritical. And then added into that this kind of tantalizingly sexy older woman, we have this violence with the cattle prod and the reminder. 15 minutes, she says to me. She gives me an oblong of purple cardboard from a stack of them on the table. It's like a fitting room in the department stores of the time before. To the woman behind me, I hear her say, "You were just here." And so we see here that the women's restroom is being used as a place of the women's washroom is being used as a place of rest for the girls, the women that work at or are at Jezebel's. And so she's allowed 15 minutes, and she's given this kind of card that's her slip. And then the woman behind her is she's told that she's not allowed because she's already been in there. "You were just here." "I need to go again," the woman says. "Rest break once an hour," says the aunt. "You know the rules." And we get this sinister reminder that Jezebel's is more like a prison than it is like a nightclub. The woman begins to protest in a whiny, desperate voice. I push open the door. I remember this. Remember, this hotel is a place that Offred's been before, in the time before with Luke. There's a rest area, gently lit in pinkish tones, with several easy chairs and a sofa in lime green bamboo shoot print, with a wall clock above it in a golden filigree frame. Here they haven't removed the mirror. There's a long one opposite the sofa. You need to know, here, what you look like. Through an archway beyond, there's a row of toilet cubicles, also pink, wash basins and more mirrors. And we have this this throwback to the luxury of female washrooms in the time before, and then this sense that this space is a space that's unchanged, and that isn't because of some mistake that's been made in Gilead, but because there's partly a sense of the pointlessness of being in these women and the time that they might spend in there. Several women are sitting in the chairs and on the sofa with their shoes off, smoking. They stare at me. They're suspicious of her as I come in. There's perfume in the air and stale smoke. and the scent of working flesh. And we just have these constant reminders of what these women are here for. You knew, as in new to working at Jezebel's, says one of them. Yes, I say, looking around for Moira. She's nowhere in sight. The women don't smile. They return to their smoking as if it is serious business. In the room beyond, a woman in a catsuit with a tail made of orange fake fur is redoing her makeup. This is like backstage, grease paint, smoke, materials of illusion. So we have this sense that these women are suspicious of her. They don't know who she is. Perhaps this is their hardened. They see her as competition. They just don't care, or they're worried about who she is and what she might say to others. And then we have this description of this being like backstage, with these women creating illusions, as in magic tricks, to cover the reality. And of course that's true because they are actors to a certain extent, playing a role. I stand hesitant, not knowing what to do. And just like before, when she was describing her lack of experience and knowledge of the outside of the washroom in Jezebel's, here Offred is painfully aware of now no longer understanding the social conventions of this place, of what's expected, the rules. I don't want to ask about Moira. I don't know whether it's safe. Then a toilet flushes and Moira comes out of a pink cubicle. She teeters towards me. I wait for a sign. It's all right, she says, to me and to the other women. I know her. The others smile now, and Moira hugs me. My arms go round her. The wires propping up her breasts dig into my chest. We kiss each other on one cheek and then the other. Then we stand back and we have this acceptance. And I think it's worth comparing this moment to the creature's experiences with his lack of understanding and knowledge of society and human behaviour, and then how easily Offred is accepted by Moira here, and by the rest of the women. God awful, she says. She grins at me. You look like the whore of Babylon, who of course is Jezebel from the Old Testament. Isn't that what I'm supposed to look like? I say. You looks like something the cat dragged in. Yes, she says, pulling up her front. Not my style. And this thing is about to fall to shreds. I wish they'd dredge up someone who still knows how to make them. Then I could get something halfway decent. And we have firstly the humour, and then we have the kind of practicality, the rationality with which Moira's character is kind of always aligned. So as she tells us her story, it's peppered with humour and this very kind of rational, unemotional experiences. You pick that out, I say. Wonder if maybe she chooses it out of the others because it's less gorish. At least it's only black and white. Hell no, she says. Government issue. I guess they thought it was me. And then we have that lovely idea that her uniform has been issued to her in Jezebel's, just as Offred's uniform has been issued to her. I still can't believe it's her. I touch her arm again, and then I begin to cry. And we have that tactile, that constant kind of need for sensory experiences by Offred, and then she is overwhelmed. Don't do that, she says. Moira, again, practical, rational. Your eyes will run. There isn't time. Shove over. She says to the two women on the sofa, her usual peremptory, rough-cut, slapdash manner. And usually she gets away with it, and we have this kind of this sense of authority or arrogance with Moira's character, which again, her self-confidence that we love so much about her. My break's up anyway, says one of the women, who's wearing a baby blue lace-up Merry Widow and white stockings. She stands up, shakes my hand. Welcome, she says, and we have that sense of unity. The other woman obligingly moves over, and Moira and I sit down. The first thing we do is take off our shoes. What the hell are you doing here? Moira says then. Not that it isn't great to see you, but it's not so great to see you. What did you do wrong? Laugh at his dick. And the assumption there that she's the only way someone ends up at Jezebel's is because they've been sent there as a punishment. I look up at the ceiling. Is it bugged? I say. I wipe around my eyes gingerly with my fingertips. Black comes off. And we have this idea of this room. Is it bugged by the eyes? Is it bugged by the regime? Someone could be listening into them. Probably, says Moira. You want a cig? I'd love one, I say. Here, she says to the woman next to her. Lend me one, will you? And again, that confidence by Moira. The woman hands over grudgingly. Moira is still a skillful borrower. I smile at that, and we have this sense that Moira in some ways is unchanged. Not completely, but in some ways she's unchanged by her experiences in Gilead. On the other hand, it might not be, as in it might not be bugged, the room, says Moira. I can't imagine they'd care about anything we have to say. They've already heard most of it, and anyway, nobody gets out of here except in a black van. You must know that if you're here. So we have this sense, not only this kind of this belittling of women, they're not interested in anything that gets said in the women's washroom, but also that sense of finality. Nobody gets out of here except in a black van, which of course is the black van of the eyes, which goes to the headquarters and then eventually will end up with someone on the wall. And so there is no escape. And she is still questioning how it is that Offred's ended up here. I pull her head over so I can whisper in her ear. I'm temporary, I tell her. It's just tonight. I'm not supposed to be here at all. He smuggled me in, and we have the danger. Who? She whispers back. That shit you're with? I've had him. He's the pits. He's my commander, I say. So we've got all sorts of things here. So we've got this confession that she's in Jezebel's when she shouldn't be. And then we've got Moira. I've had him. He's the pits. And so we have this kind of this is a very uneasy moment for the reader as we realise that as part of her position at Jezebel's, Moira has slept with Offred's commander. And so we have that kind of this kind of uneasy sense of the sexuality and the casual sex that Atwood is creating. And then when she says he's the pits, we have this sense of his sexual inadequacy, which is potentially one of the reasons why he hasn't successfully got one of the handmaids pregnant. So he's my commander, I say. She nods. Some of them do that. They get a kick out of it, so they get this perverse kick out of the power of bringing their handmaids in. And then we have this kind of Moira almost takes the male role here as she talks about this kind of sex with these men in the way that men as a generalization, like to talk about sex with women. So it's like screwing on the altar or something. Your gang, as in the handmaids, are supposed to be chaste, which is pure vessels, as in to carry a carrier. They like to see you all painted up. Just another crummy power trip. And of course, as the commander's been behaving, we suspect that this may well be true. This interpretation hasn't occurred to me. I apply it to the commander, but it seems too simple for him, too crude. Surely his motivations are more delicate than that. It may be only vanity that prompts me to think so. And Offred's thought process is uncomfortable with the idea that she's being manipulated as part of a power trip. And to a certain extent, as we kind of draw towards the culmination of the novel, it's interesting to see that potentially the commander does have some affection for Offred as a person. We don't have much time left, I say. Tell me everything. Moira shrugs. What's the point? She says. But she knows there is a point. And so she does. And there is, of course, this hope for both of them as a result of her story. This is what she says, whispers more or less. I can't remember exactly because I have no way of writing it down. I filled it out for her as much as I can. We didn't have much time, so she just gave the outlines. So we have this reminder of the fragmented narrative, that this is a story that Offred has been told, that she's repeating. And of course that's similar to Victor as he retells the creature's narrative. And then she says she's filled it out, she's embellished it, she's added details to make it sound more like Moira. And of course, again, that hints at the kind of unreliability of the narrative. She also told me this in 2 sessions. We managed a second break together. Remember, they're only allowed 1 break an hour, or at least an hour in between breaks. And so they have this second break where they've both, you know, been working, as it were, in between. I try to make it sound as much like her as I can. It's a way of keeping her alive. So Offred recreates Moira's voice, and then when she says a way of keeping her alive, we have to ask the question, where is Moira now? I left that old hag, Aunt Elizabeth, tied up like a Christmas turkey behind the furnace. And of course we now get the continuation of Moira's story, as we know from how she tied up Aunt Elizabeth as she escaped. I really felt like it. I wanted to kill her, this revenge that she desires. I really felt like it. But now I'm just glad as I didn't, or things would be a lot worse for me. I couldn't believe how easy it was to get out of the centre. And that's because of the assumed compliance of the women. They are so indoctrinated that they wouldn't think of trying to walk out. In that brown outfit, I just walked right through. I kept going as if I knew where I was heading till I was out of sight. I didn't have any great plan. It wasn't an organised thing like they thought, though when they were trying to get it out of me, I made up a lot of stuff. You do that when they use electrodes and other things. You don't care what you say. So she hasn't got a plan. She's just self-assured enough to walk out, and then she hints at what came afterwards, because of course we know that she's been captured somehow and ended up at Jezebel's, and so we have this interrogation after being caught where she confesses. She creates some great plan to satisfy their need for information from her. I kept my shoulders back and my chin up and marched along, trying to think of what to do next. When they busted the press, they picked up a lot of women I knew, as in the kind of publishers. Remember that she worked for this feminist publishing company, and I thought they'd most likely have the rest by now. I was sure they had a list. We were dumb to think we could keep it going the way we did, even underground, even when we moved everything out of the office and into people's cellars and back rooms. So I knew better than to try any of those houses. And we have this sense of this kind of this surveillance and this spying, and as kind of the power of Gilead increases, they go in and search all of these places and find all of this information. I had some sort of idea of where I was in relation to the city, though I was walking along a street I couldn't remember having seen before. I figured out from the sun where north was. Girl Scouts was some use after all. We have that irony there. I thought I might as well head that way, see if I could find the yard or the square or anything around it. And that's a direct reference to these 2 points in Harvard University, which of course is the heart of Gilead. Then I would know for sure where I was. I also thought that it would look better for me to be going towards the centre of things rather than away. It would look more plausible. And so she heads right into the heart of Gilead as a way of trying to find her escape, because that's more realistic. They'd set up more checkpoints while we were inside the centre. They were all over the place. We have this sense of the rapid changes that take place as Gilead is established. The first one scared the shit out of me. I came on it suddenly round the corner. I knew it wouldn't look right if I turned round in full view and went back, so I bluffed it through, the same as I had at the gate, putting on that frown, keeping myself stiff, pursing my lips, looking right through them as if they were festering sores. And so again, we have her acting as in the role of an aunt in order to kind of survive and escape. And that just reminds us that there's lots of role acting that takes place in this book. You know, both of them are acting in the role as prostitutes at this moment. So she stares down at these men. You know, the way the aunts look when they say the word man. It worked like a charm, and it did at the other checkpoints too. But inside my head was going round, the insides of my head were going round like crazy. I only had so much time before they found the old bat and sent out the alarm. Soon enough they'd be looking for me, one fake aunt on foot. I tried to think of someone. I ran over and over the people I knew. At last, I tried to remember what I could about our mailing list. We destroyed it, of course, early on. Or we didn't destroy it, we divided it up among us. Each of us memorised a section, and then we destroyed it. We were still using the mails then. We didn't put our logo on the envelopes anymore. It was getting far too risky. And we have this kind of this lovely strategy that they use of dividing up the list of all of the members, and each memorising a section so that no one has the whole list, but they still have all of them. And we have that sense there of this complex survival strategies of these organisations and different groups as they kind of try to rebel, to create an underground within Gilead. So I tried to recall my section of the list. I won't tell you the name I chose, because I don't want them to get in trouble, if they haven't already. It could be I've spilled all of this stuff. It's hard to remember what you say when they're doing it. You'll say anything, and this is the interrogation, so she can't remember much about the interrogation. I chose them because they were a married couple, and those were safer than anyone single, especially anyone gay. I also remembered their designation beside their name, Q. It said, which meant Quaker. They had the religious denominations marked where there were any, for marches. That way you could tell who might turn out for what. It's no good calling on the C's, as in the Catholics, to do abortion stuff, for instance. Not that we'd done much of that lately. I remembered their address too. We'd grilled each other on those addresses. It was important to remember them exactly, zip code and all. And suddenly we realise how much at risk Moira's friends and these people are, because this kind of information about them is stored inside the head of somebody that could be interrogated. By that time, I'd hit Mass Ave, and I knew where I was, and I knew where they were too. Now I was worrying about something else. When these people saw an aunt coming up the walk, wouldn't they just lock their door and pretend not to be home because of the fear of the regime? But I had to try anyway. It was my only chance. I figured they weren't likely to shoot me. It was about 5 o'clock at this time, and I was tired of walking, especially that aunt's way like a goddamn soldier, poker up the arse, and I hadn't had anything to eat since breakfast. And in a lot of ways, so they won't shoot her because the Quakers are pacifists, but she describes herself as walking like an aunt, like a soldier, and actually in a lot of ways that's exactly what the aunts are in Gilead. They are part of their army fighting their battle. It's just that the way they do that is through re-education and indoctrination. What I didn't know, of course, was that in those early days, the aunts and even the centre were hardly common knowledge. It was all secret at first, behind barbed wire. And then again, we get a little insight into this structure of Gilead. And of course, the red centres and the aunts, and the purpose of that wouldn't be something that Gilead would necessarily want to share widely with the public. And so it's secret at first. And that reminds us very much of the concentration camps in Nazi Germany before 1939, when the Nazis declare war on Poland and World War II breaks out. You know, we have all of these concentration camps that are already created and just kept absolutely secret. There might have been objections to what they were doing even then. So although people had seen the odd aunt around, they weren't really aware of what they were for. So we have this sense of Gilead suppressing the knowledge that's available to the general public, and that in itself creates passivity. They must have thought they were some kind of army nurse. Already they'd stopped asking questions unless they had to. So these people let me in right away. It was the woman who came to the door. I told her I was doing a questionnaire. I did so she wouldn't look surprised, in case anyone was watching. But as soon as I was inside the door, I took off the headgear and told them who I was. They could have phoned the police or whatever. I know I was taking a chance, but like I say, there wasn't any choice. Anyway, they didn't. They gave me some clothes, a dress of hers, burned the aunt's outfit and the pass in their furnace. They knew that had to be done right away. They didn't like having me there. That much was clear. It made them nervous. They had 2 little kids, both under 7. I could see their point. And so we have this this idea that there's risk for both sides by letting her into the house and helping her even a little bit. These Quakers are placing themselves and their children at great risk. And there's obviously the risk for Offred. And yet they're afraid of her and that risk, but they still help her. And we have to question why they make this sacrifice. They put themselves in this danger. And as we read through, there is great sacrifice made on the part of many, many people as we kind of have this kind of underground female road that that Moira describes. And we'll look at that as we get into the next video, which is the rest of this chapter.